Okay, we are going to start this second part again, and for Ben's help, I do have it. My gosh, I do have an ID sheet. Here you go. Our overall topic is the Battle of the Little Bighorn Part 3, and our subtopic, first subtopic, as we mentioned yesterday, was back on the bluffs with Reno and companies A, G, and M. Keeping in mind, for Anna's benefit, that everybody else has been killed. Okay? What we have is we have Reno's, companies A, G, and M. We have Benteen and the pack train, the men that went along with that. Okay? C, I, L, E, and F. Done. Okay? Now, remember again, envision that you're back at the bluffs of the Reno retreat. Reno is joined by Captain Benteen and his forces. When Captain Benteen arrives, Reno is noticeably shaken, unstable. And who could blame him for what he just went through? Benteen helped Major Reno get his composure back. And then Captain Benteen orders Reno's men to immediately dig rifle pits because he's sure that there's going to be an oncoming Indian attack after whatever's happening at Custer Hill, which they're not aware of. And again, these rifle pits are simply, they're on a plain. There's no protection. They're digging down the dirt to provide something they can get behind. We did mention that if some of them shot their horses and put horses across them, or anything, I mean canteens, anything they had that they felt would stop a bullet, they were putting on top of these rifle pits to provide protection. Now, during the time they were preparing, Captain Thomas Weir approached Major Reno and he said, "Sir, permission to go to the sound of the firing." And what he meant by that is they could hear firing off in the distance, and he knew that was the other 5 companies with Custer, Yates, Keogh, etc. And Reno responded to Weir's request as permission denied, we have wounded here. Weir, not happy with that particular answer, then went to Benteen and said to Benteen, "Sir, permission to go to the sound of the firing." And Benteen's immediate response was permission denied. Weir was very frustrated. He was very disgusted by the fact that he couldn't go and provide assistance to Custer and his men. So he simply individually left without permission, and he rode northward toward the bluffs to see what he could see. Well, Winfield Edgerly, who was Weir's lieutenant, assumed that Weir had obtained Reno's permission, and he basically then ordered the entire company that was under Weir's command to follow Weir. So all of a sudden, here's a command of men that are taking off and heading towards Custer Hill. Well, they advanced along those bluffs. This is new for today. They advanced along those bluffs towards Custer Hill, and they couldn't really see what was going on, so there was a real high hill that was between where Benteen and Reno's men were and where Custer was getting finished off. And they went to the top of that hill. What do you think that's called today?
Weir's Hill.
Close. Look on your ID sheet. Weir Point. And you'll get a chance to climb up to the top of Weir Point when we're there. So he's traveling, heading for the sound of the firing with his men. They have not received permission to do that. They decide they see this really tall hill, and you'll see it, kind of a point almost, and they crawl to the top of that or climb to the top of that for a better look. That becomes known now as Weir Point. So what Captain Weir did is he got out his field glasses and he glassed the area, in the area where Custer was fighting. And when he was asked, "What do you see? What do you see?" he said he saw what he thought was, quote, "shooting into the ground." That's what he was witnessing from that distance with his field glasses. He saw what he thought was shooting into the ground. What would that have been? What? The Indians finishing off Custer's men. So the Indians that appeared to be shooting into the ground were later determined to be young warriors that were finishing off Custer's men. Okay? Well, Weir and his troops stayed at the high point for a short period of time, and they were soon joined by Captain Benteen and more soldiers who had realized that Weir had taken off. And he didn't, I don't think he was angry at him. He thought he maybe misunderstood the instructions or whatever. He wasn't too concerned. But as Weir and his men are on top of Weir Point, they're soon joined by Captain Benteen and some more soldiers. Well, as they look up, what do they see?
Indian charging.
That's exactly right. Hostiles charging them. An overwhelming amount of warriors were heading their way. So they were forced to go back to the Reno-Benteen battlefield, okay, area. They were going to go back. They saw these, so they only got as far as Weir Point and saw the hostiles coming, and after Benteen joined them and they see what they're having come at them, they turn around and head back to what we know as the Reno-Benteen area, where that battlefield is, where they're at the top of the bluffs. Now, as Weir and Benteen and the men retreated back toward that area from the Indian attack, all of a sudden Lieutenant Edward Godfrey and his command showed up to provide what? Support as they tried to retreat. Okay? So here's Weir and his men, Benteen and his men decided it's important we get back to that safety of that Reno-Benteen area, the top of the bluffs, and as they're facing these charging hostiles, Lieutenant Edward Godfrey and his command had rode up in support and were basically holding off the hostiles to a point. Historians will tell you if Godfrey doesn't make this heroic effort here, you may not have Weir and Benteen as soldiers able to make it back to where they were. They may have all been killed. So historians believe the brave action on the part of Lieutenant Edward Godfrey and his troopers probably saved the lives of Weir, Benteen, and their men, because they don't believe they would have gotten back without that support. Okay, that takes us to the end of that subtopic that's called, the long one there, that was back at the bluffs with Reno and Companies AG&M. That'll take us to our next subtopic then, which is the Reno-Benteen battlefield. What happened on those bluffs after those men got back and joined? What went on and how long did it go on for? Okay? So the Reno-Benteen battlefield, that is a specific battle area that is marked off. Now, I want you to take out this particular map I gave you the other day and just kind of have it out in front of you, because it kind of gives you a little idea what's going on here. So just take it out so you get an idea. That's the top of the bluffs. If you look right here, you can see where Reno's charge was and his route up to the bluffs in this area right here. And you'll get a chance to walk this. It's in a circular positioning. It's what we know as the Reno-Benteen battlefield. Okay? So we really are having three battles in the Battle of the Bighorn. You've got the Reno charge, you've got Custer's advance and his defeat, and now you've got a defense action at the Reno-Benteen battlefield. How many of you knew that there was actually three different skirmishes that went on when you heard about the Battle of Little Bighorn? Most people think, you know, they rushed in there and got wiped out to a man, that was it. There actually were three different conflicts. Okay, we're talking about the third. Now, what day are we talking about still? We've talked for how many weeks now on this, and we're still talking about the same day, June 25th, 1876. So, back at the Reno-Benteen battlefield, for the rest of June 25th and the whole day on June 26th, Major Reno, Captain Benteen, and their men fought furiously against the Indians, trying to save their lives. So the rest of that day and all day the next, they were fending off Indian attacks one after another at the area we know as Reno-Benteen battlefield. Okay, so they are continually fighting for their lives for 24 hours or more. Okay? More than 24 hours. Well, in the late afternoon of June 26th, after fighting the cavalry the rest of the day, what time did Custer get wiped out, by the way? About 4:30. Okay, 4:30, 5 o'clock in that area, maybe 5:30. Okay, so the rest of that day and overnight, and most of the next day until the late afternoon of the 26th, they fought off these Indians. Finally, in the late afternoon of the 26th, the Indians left. Why? Why did they just not stay there and finish off Benteen and Reno's men? Why did they leave?
They didn't want to be rude.
No, they didn't run out of ammo. They had enough ammo they could have shot forever. What? No. No.
Church.
What? No. No, good guess. Could be a religious thing. No, think about what would make them retreat.
The Buffalo movement. They think support was going to come.
Stay with that. Think about our thing. Custer, don't be greedy. Wait for us. Who's still coming? Terry and Gibbon. Well, what happened is the natives, the Indians, could see dust coming from the Wolf Mountains. What did that tell them? The cavalry was on their way. So once they saw dust moving back in the direction of the Wolf Mountains, they simply left. They knew more soldiers were coming. They packed up, left the battlefield, carrying a giant celebration like you'd won, a national championship. Okay, they had a great victory over the white man at the Battle of Little Bighorn. So as soon as they saw danger coming, more reinforcements, as AD said, very good. When they saw the dust coming from the Wolf Mountains, they knew someone's coming. Who was coming? General Terry, Colonel Gibbon, and their men that Custer was supposed to wait for. Okay? During that stand at the Reno-Benteen battlefield, Reno had suffered losses of 47 killed and 52 wounded. That was the total on the Reno charge and what happened during the retreat. So Reno loses 47 men killed and 52 wounded in his charge and retreat and defense at the Reno-Benteen battlefield.
How did the Indians pack up so fast?
Okay, just a second. Caleb has a good question. You talk about leave the battle or leave the villages?
The village.
Okay, we'll get to that. Good question. So, just bear with me. So Reno and Benteen are relieved simply because they see reinforcements coming. That evening, the evening of June 26th, what did the Indian village prepare to do? Move. And early in the morning on the 27th, they were gone. Remember, we told you they were mobile, ready to go at a moment's notice? So they fight all day the 25th, or pretty much not all day, but they fight the 25th, wipe out Custer and the 7th Cavalry and his battalions, move up to Reno-Benteen battlefield, fight the rest of the day the 25th and all day the 26th. Late in the evening, the 26th, they see the dust coming, they leave, they go back to the village is prepared, dismantled, etc. And the morning of the 27th, the village is gone. They are gone. So when Terry and Gibbon arrive, is there anybody there?
No.
No. Picture that in your mind. So early in the morning, the village starts to leave. In the late morning, what would late morning be time-wise? 10-ish, 11-ish in there before noon. In late morning, the Terry Gibbon column came upon the Reno-Benteen battlefield first. Now keep this in your mind. So they rode up to where Reno and Benteen were. 47 killed, 52 wounded. Sure, pretty much I'm guessing in disarray, after going through all. So that's where they come first. And the Indians, keep in mind, are gone. They left early in the morning. There's no village. Is there remnants of village? Sure. But they're gone. How many thousand were we talking here? They thought 2,000 warriors. Probably 8,000 to 10,000 people are gone in that period of time. That's how mobile they were. Okay? So late in the morning of June 27th, the Terry Gibbon command came upon the Reno-Benteen battlefield. Now, when they arrived, did Major Reno and Captain Benteen know where Custer was? No. They did not dare go out and look for him yet because they didn't know what to expect. Didn't want to set themselves up for ambush or whatever. So when Terry and Gibbon arrived with their men at the Reno-Benteen battlefield, neither Reno nor Benteen have any idea where Custer is or what has happened to him. No idea. Okay? They actually thought that they had received the brunt of the attack, and they thought that Custer had left them to rejoin Terry and Gibbon. They thought they did their thing and went back and met up with Terry and Gibbon. That's what Reno and Benteen were thinking. They had no idea that Custer had been wiped out to the man the day before. They had no idea. Okay? They actually thought Custer probably fought the Indians, figured out he had too many against him, and went back and joined Terry Gibbon. That's what they were thinking. Okay. That takes us to our next subtopic, which I think is kind of interesting, the aftermath of the Battle of the Little Bighorn and Custer Hill. So what's going to happen now? What is Terry and Gibbon's column going to go do? Well, they're going to go look and see what's happened. Okay? They have no idea. So, the aftermath of the Battle of the Little Bighorn and Custer Hill. Well, once Terry got there on the morning of June 27th, or which we should say early or late morning of June 27th, he sent Lieutenant James Bradley. I'm not sure why that's not underlined on your sheet, but I'll write it up here. He sent Lieutenant James Bradley and Crow scouts out in search of Custer and his command towards that Custer Hill area. So after getting information and making sure everything was all right at the Reno-Benteen battlefield, General Terry sent Lieutenant James Bradley and Crow scouts to basically go look for Custer and his command, try to find out if they were there and what had happened. So on June 27th, I'm going to guess probably early afternoon, General Alfred Terry sends James Bradley and Crow scouts to go look for Custer and his command. Bradley goes out with the scouts, he comes back, and he reports to Terry that he found Custer dead and had counted the bodies of 197 men. Okay, this is what Bradley reported back to Terry. He came back from the battle area, and he said he found Custer dead and the bodies of 197 men. They counted them. There was one lone survivor of that battle. Anybody know who it was? That horse under General Custer, Comanche, was wounded but alive. Whose horse was he? Captain Miles Keel's. Comanche on your sheet. So the only survivor of the Custer battle area was a horse by the name of Comanche that belonged to Captain Miles Keel. The lone survivor of the battle was Captain Keel's horse, Comanche. Now, just on a side note, you can write down if you want or not, the horse was badly wounded. They actually took the horse to the far west with the rest of the command when this whole thing was over. They treated that horse and the horse lived. But that was the only survivor. Okay. Now, after Bradley came back and reported to Terry what he had seen, Custer dead and 197 bodies, Bradley went out again with Captain Benteen and Captain Weir back out towards Custer Hill. Well, when they reached some of the dead, Captain Weir was quoted as saying, "Oh, how white they look." So when Bradley, Benteen, and Weir are sent back again in the direction of the fallen men, when Weir came upon dead soldiers, he was quoted as saying in a depressed voice, "Oh, how white they look." Can you imagine riding up on that scene? That was weird. Well, basically what happened is night fell. The next morning, the survivors of the 7th Cavalry began the painful task of burying Colonel Custer's command. And they were buried right where they fell in shallow graves. So the next day on the 28th, the burial details went out, and all the men that were killed in the conflict on Custer Hill, Medicine Tail Coulee, Deep Ravine, etc., they were all buried where they fell in shallow graves. And they were marked, the cross, they were marked with a cross from what? From where?
Pack tree.
No. What don't they take with them when they leave a village?
The
Teepee poles, because they cut new ones. So all the soldiers were buried in shallow graves with teepee poles used as markers in a cross. Okay?
I have a question.
Yep.
Why shallow graves?
Because it was hot and hard to dig. And I'll get to that. That's a good question, but I'll get to what they're going to do later. Okay. At Custer Hill specifically, they came upon a majority of dead soldiers that were stripped, badly mutilated, and scalped. They took no prisoners, so to speak, on Custer Hill. They were actually more brutal on Custer Hill than they were anywhere. A lot of the soldiers were badly mutilated, they were stripped naked, and they were scalped. Why did they strip them naked? Because they wanted to show them off, or what? They used everything they had. They took their clothes and used them. They took all their possessions. Okay? Now, you talk about badly mutilated. Here's Tom Custer, Custer's brother. He was so badly mutilated that the only way they could identify him is he had a tattoo of the American flag on his arm, which showed the flag, the Goddess of Liberty, and his initials TWC. That's the only way they could even tell who he was because the tattoo on his arm, which showed American flag, the Goddess of Liberty, which would be like the Statue of Liberty, and his initials TWC. That's the only way they could even tell who he was. He was so badly mutilated. Now picture this in your mind. You can write it down if you want. Tom Custer lay face down, bristled with arrows, which means that he's got arrows shot in his back area, as like you couldn't believe. Bristling with arrows means a lot of arrows. The back of his skull was smashed as flat as your hand. His throat had been cut, and the top of his head, his scalp, almost completely ripped off. They almost took his entire top of his, you see it's up here in the hair, they took almost the entire top of his head off for a scalp.
Where's his eardrums punctured too?
An arrow had been shot into the top of his head with such force they could not pull it out. Okay? And his chest was split wide open, and his heart was removed. That's how bad it was. Now, I can ask you to tell you all that in a test, probably not, but you get the idea, right? Okay? Now, this is interesting to know. An Indian by the name of Rain in the Face, which is on your ID sheet, is the one who they believed mutilated Tom Custer so badly. This is a speculation, but I'll tell you why they think it was him. So, an Indian by the name of Rain in the Face was given credit, so to speak, for the brutality given to Tom Custer. Rain in the Face actually had an earlier run-in with Custer prior to this battle, and it was in the 1860s, which was quite a while, at least 10 years prior to that. And what happened is, you can write this down, but just know who Rain in the Face is. It's up to you. Charlie Reynolds heard this Rain in the Face boasting of a murder of white soldiers, and he even boasted they had killed a veterinarian that was working for the 7th Cavalry. And when Reynolds reported this to George